In San Francisco, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up in the next hour, Netflix adds just over 5 million subscribers in the last quarter, coming in well below expectations. Does this signal the end of an era of massive growth? We're going to break down the streaming giant's earnings results. Plus, Amazon crashes on Prime Day and threatens its 36-hour sales extravaganza and $3.4 billion in possible earnings. We speak to the man who heads up the Prime business at Amazon. And Elon Musk raises eyebrows again on Twitter. This time, has the outspoken CEO gone too far? But first, to our top story. Netflix's second quarter numbers are in, and the streaming giant came in well short of analyst estimates for new subscribers. Netflix announcing it gained 5.1 million new subscribers. That's about 1 million fewer than the street expected. And the trend may continue as Netflix announces it expects to add 5 million subscribers in the coming quarter as well. Shares of Netflix plunging on this news, and the jitters rippling through other tech giants Facebook, Amazon, Apple, and Google all fell in aftermarket trading. So why the subscriber slowdown? Joining us now from New York, we have Dan Ives, Chief Strategy Officer at GBH Insights, and in studio with me here we have Bloomberg Tech Executive Editor Tom Giles. Dan, I want to start with you. You were expecting more than 6 million subscriber adds, and I know you're bullish on this company. What went wrong here?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's definitely a negative gut punch to the bulls. I mean, expecting a beat on the subscriber number came in light, especially international. I mean, what I'd say, forest through the trees, if you look at it, predicting some of the international growth is going to ebb from quarter to quarter. We've seen blowout results the last, call it 6 to 8 quarters. This is definitely what I view as more of a speed bump, not the start of a negative trend. I think ultimately right here, you're going to see the negative knee-jerk reaction. International growth story. We get to 100 million subs in the next 2 years, the growth thesis is intact, stock goes much higher. But nonetheless, the company's going to have a lot of explaining to do on the call coming up in terms of why they missed and, looking forward, is there anything that they're seeing internationally why they saw this weakness?
So Dan thinks it's just a speed bump, Tom. We'll see. But if so, why?
Well, there's a few things that are going on. When is the last time you kind of got excited about a show on Netflix?
It's been a while, I'll be honest.
Right, Stranger Things, we're looking for that next season. We're at the edge of our seats. The Crown, when's that? When are we going to see more of that?
Well, and it's interesting because the fact that they don't have a seasonal schedule sort of gives them more flexibility, but it can also leave viewers feeling really frustrated when these new shows, new seasons just don't come out.
Well, and it's not like when we were growing up, you always knew in the fall you were going to get the new shows. You've got the upfronts. Advertisers know what to look for at a specific time of the year. That has all gone away, and in many ways that's been the strength of these streaming services. Amazon's the same way. At the same time, it leaves the rest of us kind of guessing. Oh, well, when is that going to happen again? There's just few and far between for Netflix. One of the bright spots has been Nanette, this comedy show. People talking about that, people getting excited about that, but it's a one-off. It's not a series. The other thing that you're going to see, Dan talked about international growth. Netflix has talked about getting original programming in countries like India. That can make a really big difference once you start creating shows that people in other countries can get really excited about, talking about, and bringing in new viewers for.
Meantime, Netflix is feeling the impact of this punch. Its market cap now smaller than Disney and smaller than Comcast. We've been talking over the last few weeks about how it had surpassed both. Dan, is this because of the lack of new content or the unpredictability of the schedule of new content? Others have suggested it could be due to the World Cup.
Look, I mean, the content's key. Right now, it's a content arms race. That's why they're spending $8 billion. We believe $10 billion next year. But also, you take a step back. Look at Disney, 21st Century Fox. Obviously, streaming service coming next year. More competitive headwinds. You got AT&T, Time Warner. That's why right now they need to drive content. Tom raised a good point. It speaks to why Netflix has to spend at this rate. Any sort of dip in content, you could see those sort of speed bumps in a quarter, and especially with international build out. Content's going to be so key here for Netflix. And right now, you put it all together, you got Disney on the horizon. This is really going to be a key, what I'll call 6 to 12 months, for Netflix to navigate through some of these near-term, we'll call them headwinds, specifically what we saw this quarter, and give investors comfort that it is only a speed bump and not the start of a longer-term negative subscriber trend.
Meantime, I do have this chart in my GTV library showing how Netflix is burning through cash, even as its stock price had continued to climb, Tom. Interestingly, Netflix's fastest growing expense is not content, but marketing.
That's right. I mean, you know, when you don't have that word of mouth, that thing that everybody's talking about, getting excited about, you do need to get the message out there. You need to keep it top of mind because there is so much competition in streaming. You have so many alternatives, and as you pointed out, the World Cup could have been a factor for some people. Who are TiVoing that, maybe couldn't watch it during work hours. You just watch it later on in the day. So sure, if you want to get the message out, you got to get it out there somewhere. So it's going to come from marketing.
Meantime, Dan, we've seen other tech stocks get rattled. Do you think there's any relation or any longer-term trend at stake here? We're expecting all of these companies to report in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, look, you'll see a risk-off trade here. I mean, Netflix on FANG names, you know, that really being a leader. You know, I think what you'll see especially over the next week or two, you could see some of these FANG names getting hit. Not that there's necessarily a correlation, but the worry here is, given some of the valuations, some that are stretched in the view of many, you know, you'll see the stocks get hit. And I think the worry as we navigate through the rest of earnings season is Netflix a canary in the coal mine. Ultimately, we do think it's more of a one-off in terms of from a speed bump perspective on the subscriber side. And that's why Hastings has to do a very good job in the conference call, giving investors comfort what the next, you know, called 3 to 6 months looks like.
All right, we're going to continue to discuss this later in the show. This letter coming from Reed Hastings to shareholders saying that YouTube is their major competitor. HBO and Disney evolving. Dan Ives of GBH Insights there, along with Bloomberg's very own Tom Giles. Thank you both. Well, the FCC is questioning Sinclair Media's attempt to win approval to buy Tribune TV stations. FCC Chair Ajit Pai said he would send the $3.9 billion deal to a hearing, a step that may kill this deal. Sinclair was to sell some of the stations to meet regulations, but Pai contends that the sale was structured in a way for Sinclair to control the assets regardless. The deal would give Sinclair a reach into almost 59% of U.S. households. The deal is being reviewed by the Department of Justice and the FCC. In February, it was revealed that the FCC was conducting its own investigation into whether or not Chairman Pai was lining up policies to favor the deal before it was announced. Coming up, it is one of the most important days on the Amazon calendar, and it already has some big snafus. We're going to speak to the exec in charge of Amazon Prime next. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. Listen on the Bloomberg Radio app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on SiriusXM. This is Bloomberg. A major hiccup on one of the most critical shopping days of the year at Amazon. The Prime Day sales promotion ran into some major technical glitches on the website and the app about an hour after the sale kicked off, spiking around launch time, according to the website downdetector.com. I want to bring in Guru Hariharan, CEO of the e-commerce platform Boomerang. He's also a former executive at Amazon working on the supply chain and retail merchandise. You have analysts out there saying they are quite frankly shocked that Amazon wouldn't be prepared for this kind of traffic. Amazon has said it's acknowledged these technical glitches. It says that they are working on it. What do you make of it?
Listen, Prime Day is like the Super Bowl of e-commerce. This is the day when Amazon's putting the best of its arsenal in front of everybody on its website, and now the entire ecosystem, including companies like Walmart and the consumer packaged goods, are behind that. And one thing we know about Amazon is that they're extremely good at operations. Now, if the website is going down, it just means one thing, which is that they've gotten a lot more traffic than they expected. And if I'm an Amazon shareholder, I'm standing up and rooting for this.
That's an interesting twist. I mean, you don't want to completely mess up the first quarter.
For sure, yeah. So I think for them to lose all this traffic is and not convert all of that is going to be a major problem. But if you look at the positive side, there's a lot more shoppers coming in. It's starting to become a very big phenomena. And one thing also to remember, Emily, is that Prime Day is almost a game preparation, a preparation that they are doing for Q4, for holiday season. And while they are as they're essentially using this to stress test their systems. And clearly they did not stand up to the stress test this time, but in preparation for the 2018 Q4 season, they are starting to get the right signals so that they're able to be ready for that prime time.
It's been going on now for a couple of hours. Do you still think that this can be a record-breaking Prime Day with this kind of more than a hiccup?
Well, Prime Day has just been going in one direction, which is up and up. Last year they grew 60%. The year before they grew about 40%. Numbers have all been double-digit and nearing 50 to 60% growth. And this year is expected to be the same, especially given that they've been starting to get a lot of support from brand manufacturers, folks like Procter & Gamble and Kellogg's. They're all putting up their own Prime Day websites on Amazon.com in support for the Prime Day deal. So the deals are a lot more mainstream in this season as opposed to a couple of years ago when they got a lot of criticism for promoting what was being thought of as like tail items, which are not so mainstream items. It's
the first Prime Day plus Whole Foods, so I guess one place you probably won't run into technical glitches is the Whole Foods store if you go in there. But can people get that excited about grocery deals? Well,
grocery is starting to hit a critical mass online. And a few years ago, if you're a large public company like, say, Kellogg's, you were not focusing too much on Amazon or even e-commerce for that matter. With Whole Foods acquisition, Amazon put online grocery front and center in all of this. And what we are seeing is this year there's a big push with Whole Foods, with Amazon pulling some $10 off for if you're buying something in Whole Foods, they're going to be allowing you to use that on Prime Day and all that. And with the grocery segment and e-commerce purchases accelerating online, we're starting to see a lot more mainstream grocery CPG companies starting to make this serious.
Amazon does have some major weaknesses in apparel, in home furnishings. These are weaknesses they have tried to combat with building Amazon branded and making more Amazon branded products. Can Amazon make up for lost ground there without compromising their relationship with third-party retailers who are not happy that Amazon is pushing its own stuff?
Well, Amazon has more than 70 private label products at this point. And even with in grocery, as you were talking about, they've launched Mama Bear and Happy Belly, and of course, not to mention the Whole Foods private brand of 365. And all of that is starting to gain a lot of margin traction for Amazon. So in traditional sense, Amazon used to push for top-line growth at very little bottom-line margins, but these private brands are starting to help Amazon gain margin advantage back with all this.
All right, hang on, Guru. We caught up with Jem Sabay, Amazon's vice president of Prime, from the Spheres at Amazon's campus in Seattle before news of this glitch broke, and we asked how they get the right deals in front of the right customers on a day like today. Take a listen.
You would be surprised. The launch of the Whole Food benefit for Prime members has been our most successful launch that we've had for any benefit launch. And I knew this going into it. I said at the time that we launched that this was our most important benefit launch since we launched Prime Video in 2011. That the adoption of Prime members to Whole Food benefits for the savings and for deals, and early signs also in the lead-up period to Prime Day has been truly phenomenal and very humbling. And so members have already saved over millions and millions of dollars through their purchases in Whole Foods.
What does a win look like at Whole Foods in particular?
Look, Prime Day for us really is just about is just a celebration event. We launched Prime Day 4 years ago in 2015. It's celebrating 20 years of Amazon as well as 10 years of the Prime program since its launch in the U.S. as well. And so what's important for us is really to try to engage as many members as possible, make sure they have a great day, they find the right deals that they're looking for, and they walk away remembering why Prime is so great and why it makes their lives so much better every single day. And so this is really around a celebratory celebratory event, engaging with our members, and exposing new members to what is still the best shopping deal in history. A unique combination of shopping and entertainment benefits, and we keep getting positive feedback customers, and we continue to invest to try to make it better for them every year.
Amazon recently raised the price of Prime for the first time since 2014. Talk to me about customer feedback. Have you seen any reduction in renewal rates as a result of that?
No, we've seen, look, customers continue to, particularly most of them start through engaging with us through our shipping benefits. And then we see increasingly higher renewal rates as they start engaging with our entertainment benefits like Prime Video, Prime Music, and Prime Photos as well. And, many members will start off with shopping, but then they'll stick around for the entertainment. And so we continue to be very humbled by the response that we've gotten. Last year on Prime Day, we added more Prime members than on any other given day in history until that point. And we're expecting a very big year this year as well.
Voice-based shopping has historically had its limits, and yet you're raising the stakes today. You've got cash prizes, a card, deep discounts for Alexa and voice-based shopping. Is it working, and in what categories?
Look, it's really across all categories, and it's also continues to be a great back-to-school shopping period as well. Last year, we sold more back-to-school shopping supplies than on any other day that year as well, and so customers were able to find and just do all of their back-to-school shopping in a single full swoop as well. And so we're really expecting strong engagement across all of our hot categories, including devices.
Is that with voice-based shopping specifically? I mean, talk to me about what trends you're seeing in terms of how people are using Echo to actually shop rather than just to play a song or answer questions.
Got it. Yeah. No, we are seeing customers engage with Prime Day in a variety of ways. I've purchased using my Echo devices many times, particularly for reordering, but also for great deals as well. And customers can go to any Echo device and ask them, Alexa, what are my Prime Day deals? And they'll get personalized recommendations for Prime Day deals. And we're really just trying to make it as easy as possible for people to be able to find the phenomenal deals that we have on offer today.
And what are you doing behind the scenes to make sure there aren't any hiccups? I mean, historically on Prime Day, there have been some issues, glitches, and people not being able to fill up their carts, some people not excited about the particular deals on offer. How do you make sure it's not like a rummage sale and that it really is a cause for celebration?
Yeah, I mean, what I can tell you is we start planning for Prime Day the day after the prior Prime Day ends. It's a company-wide effort for us. We are very focused on making sure this is a great event. Most of those incidents that you're referring to were relatively minor glitches that we resolved very quickly, and customers are able to find the deals that they want very quickly.
That was some of my interview with Jem Sabay, Amazon Vice President of Prime. Again, that was just a few hours before these glitches started happening. Guru Hariharan, CEO of e-commerce platform Boomerang, still with me. So, he said that those glitches were minor. These glitches are not. Amazon just tweeted confirming this glitch. Some customers are having difficulty shopping. We're working to resolve this issue quickly. Many are shopping successfully. In the first hour of Prime Day in the U.S., customers have ordered more items compared to the first hour last year. There are hundreds of thousands of deals to come and more than 34 hours to shop on Prime Day. Can they make up for the lost ground?
I think it's
still having not resolved this.
Yeah, so it's disappointing that they are still having issues. Typically, what we've seen is if the site goes down, if they have ordering issues, then they bring it back up relatively quickly because they have multiple layers of redundancies in their system. But in this case, seems like things are way more deeper than potentially just falling back to a redundant layer. But looks like given that some customers are able to order, it's going to be very critical for Amazon to get those servers back up and see how they can handle the load that they're getting. You've been behind the scenes at Amazon. Give us an idea of what you think is happening right now on the engineering floor. It's hell breaking loose at this point. You have engineers trying to debug what's going on. Everybody's on a call. There's a severity 1 ticket going on across the company, and vice presidents and principal engineers are on the phone trying to debug this and trying to fix. And there's no blame game happening at this point. It's purely from a root cause analysis and figuring out and fixing the issue so that they bring the service back up so that they can serve their customers. What's Jeff Bezos doing? He's definitely on the call.
All right. Guru Hariharan, CEO of Boomerang Commerce, thank you as always for stopping by. We'll be watching the next few hours. Coming up, Google is facing another showdown with the EU, this time over its control of the Android platform. We'll take a look next. This is Bloomberg. Google is facing another showdown with the EU, this time over the company's control of the Android mobile operating system. The European Commission is expected to announce an antitrust fine this week, which could top the record $2.8 billion. Google was fined last year for shutting out rivals to its shopping search service. But more significantly could be any order from the EU freeing up phone manufacturers to choose non-Google apps to install on Android phones. Bloomberg's Ed Ludlow explains.
When you buy a smartphone from manufacturers like Samsung, LG or Sony, you're also getting the Android operating system. Google gives the Android platform to the manufacturers for free, but puts contracts in place to ensure their devices come preloaded with Google services like search, maps, web browsers and email. And with research showing that Android runs on 77% of the world's smartphones, the European Union claims Google is stifling competition and hurting the development of Android devices and applications. The basic idea is users stick with the default option already on their phones and may be less likely to seek out other products from companies like Microsoft, Mozilla, or DuckDuckGo. Google disagrees. It's the second of 3 European Commission probes into Google's business. Last year, it was fined a record $2.8 billion for breaching antitrust laws over how it displays shopping ads. While the size of the penalty for this latest ruling will grab headlines, the bigger impact will be decisions on how Google should address the EU's concerns. It could be ordered to remove or renegotiate contracts with the smartphone makers, which would pave the way for competing apps and put a dent in mobile advertising revenue, which generated much of sales growth in recent years. Google denies it's being anti-competitive and argues that the real loser will be consumers, who currently get cheaper phones because Android is free. In a blog post in 2016, Google said its actions to prevent multiple versions of Android ensure that apps work across all phones, helping app developers reach more people. The company is expected to fight any EU finding against Android at the EU courts, which is the only way to halt a Commission decision.
And to a story we are watching, Airbnb was warned by the European Union to expect a regulatory clampdown unless it complies with EU standards by the end of August. The EU says the company's terms and pricing information is not in line, and they must make it more transparent. In a statement, Airbnb says, "We take this issue seriously and are committed to being as transparent as possible for our community." Coming up, Netflix plunges after slowing growth threatens its high flyer status. What caused the second quarter subscriber slowdown? We will discuss next. And Bloomberg Tech is live streaming on Twitter. You can check us out at Technology, and be sure to follow our global breaking news network at TikTok, on Twitter. This is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. Back to our top story, Netflix's second quarter results. To recap, Netflix subscriber growth slowed in the second quarter, missing its own and estimated forecasts, adding 5.1 million sets of eyes. That is about 1 million fewer subscribers than expected. Reasons for the slowdown: some fingers are pointing to a relatively thin slate of new original content, while others are wondering if viewers were distracted by the World Cup. So let's dig into the reasons behind the slowdown. With us to discuss in Princeton, we have our Bloomberg intelligence analyst, Geetha Ranganathan, and in studio, Bill Dima, CEO of Conviva, a company that measures online video analytics and viewer engagement. So, Bill, you see a lot of trends here. What do you make of this?
I'm not surprised by what we saw in the earnings. A couple of things. I think you hit it right on the money. Content is king. There haven't been a lot of new shows. We see a view of over 100 million users worldwide. U.S. growth rates for Conviva's customers were up only 7% in the U.S., but they were up 34% internationally. So the growth for Netflix coming forward is going to be international. On the World Cup, our peak load in Q2 was 3 times higher than it was in Q1, driven by the World Cup. So the World Cup, I think, was a major factor.
Geetha, let's talk about the fact that Netflix itself missed its own estimates. In his letter to shareholders, CEO Reed Hastings said, "We strive for accuracy, but warn that some quarters we will be high and other quarters will be low relative to our guidance." It's a pretty big overestimation for Netflix itself, isn't it?
It certainly is, and it's interesting because in the newsletter to investors, they actually have a chart there where they compare their number of forecasts with the actual subscribers gained in every period, and you see about every 4 to 5 quarters that they come up with a miss. So kind of suggesting that this is really just a one-off situation. What management suggested in the newsletter was that it's really hard for them to forecast in 190 markets across the globe. So kind of suggesting there that it's just a one-quarter blip, not the beginning of a longer trend, declining trend.
Bill, is it a blip or is it a trend?
I believe there's going to be at least some trend involved here because the World Cup went all the way through July 15th. As we saw triple the viewer consumption versus Q1, and you can only grow so large. So as much as they're driving in content, they're going to have to drive more content in the United States and internationally. And also, Disney's entering streaming in 2019. We've got Hulu, Hulu TV, Sling, and many others. And if you're a content provider, you have many more options than you had in the past. So I think, again, they have a 140 PE forward ratio. I think things are going to slow down.
It's interesting that this is on the back of some great news for Netflix getting more Emmy nominations than anybody else, including HBO. For the first time since it started making original content, they've completely shattered the way we expect to see new shows, and yet, you know, these new seasons are often delayed. We don't know when they're coming out. What sort of consequence does that have on viewership and on subscribers?
Well, without that level of predictability, it becomes hard to know when those shows are going to come out, and there's more viewing options than ever, and that's going to increase.
So why don't they put it on a schedule? Why don't they stick to the script a little bit more?
Well, as those of us in product development, things slip, and they have a little bit more flexibility than linear TV has, and so I think these things happen, but it becomes costly.
One of the other things, Geetha, is that Netflix, we've noticed, is spending a lot more on marketing than it has. Of course, the bulk of the spending still goes to original content, but then they have the marketing of those shows and the marketing of Netflix in general. Are we expecting those costs to continue to rise?
I definitely think so. So they made a conscious effort to increase their marketing spend, almost doubling it. So it's up $1 billion at the end of June quarter, which is a double from last year. This was a conscious effort on their part because they know that Disney is going to be coming into the market with its new streaming service. They know competition is ramping. They have to get ahead there. So that could also be a concern. I mean, marketing expenses are going to be rising, and even if with these elevated marketing expenses, they missed subscriber estimates, that could potentially be a cause for concern.
Bill, is the party for Netflix over, or is the playing field just going to become more level?
I think that it's definitely not over. It's going to be more level. I think Disney's for real. We don't know how Hulu's doing, but we expect they're doing very, very well, both with their regular service and TV.
What about Apple?
Apple's coming out, of course, as well. We don't know yet. We don't measure them.
Amazon?
Amazon is hot, too. So imagine now you're a content provider. There's many, many options, and I think the expense of these shows to license these deals are going to get more and more expensive.
Geetha, I wonder if we'll see any changes to the Netflix playbook over the next few quarters.
I mean, it's. I think really what's going to happen is Netflix management has to come out today, has to really comfort investors that this is really just a speed bump. This isn't the beginning of a longer-term trend. I think the next 6 to 12 months is really going to be key for the company.
All right, Geetha Raghunathan, Bloomberg Intelligence. Thank you so much, as well as Bill Dimas, CEO of Conviva.
It's been great to be on.
Great to have you here in the studio. All right, speaking from Helsinki, President Trump sided with Russian President Vladimir Putin over the U.S. intelligence community on the issue of Russian election interference. Meantime, Dan Coates, the director of U.S. National Intelligence, pushed back on the president's claims, saying, quote, "We've been clear in our assessments of Russian meddling in the 2016 election and their ongoing pervasive efforts to undermine our democracy, and we will continue to provide unvarnished and objective intelligence in support of our national security." For more, I want to get straight to Washington, where Bloomberg News' Tolu Olorunipa is standing by. Tolu, President Trump said he didn't see any reason why Russians would interfere in the election. What?
Yeah, that's right. The president cast doubt on his own intelligence community's assessment while standing next to the Russian president, who has denied repeatedly that Russia had anything to do with the election meddling during 2016. Now, the indictments that came out of the Justice Department just on Friday gave additional evidence that the president could have used during this meeting to tell President Putin that, yes, Russia did meddle, and this is the evidence that we had. But instead, he seemed to equivocate and basically said that Putin is denying it very strongly. I've heard from my intelligence community, and I believe both sides. He basically said, I have confidence in both. And he tried to clean that up a little bit with a tweet from Air Force One saying that, of course, I have confidence in my great intelligence community, but he left out the part about saying he believes Putin as well, and that's led to recriminations from across the political spectrum. Republicans in Washington here are really criticizing President Trump for not taking a tougher stance with Putin and not standing up for the intelligence community's assessment that Russia and Putin interfered in the 2016 election.
I believe every word of this tweet bears worth repeating from President Trump after the meeting with President Putin. As I said today many times before, I have great confidence in my intelligence people. However, I also recognize that in order to build a brighter future, we cannot exclusively focus on the past. As the world's two largest nuclear powers, we must get along. I mean, are we at a point where if Vladimir Putin says something, so it is? So it's true?
Well, President Trump seemed very willing to accept the word of Vladimir Putin, a former KGB agent who has been an adversary to the United States on a number of different issues, including in Ukraine and Syria. When it comes to cyber intrusions, President Trump's administration has said as much, that Russia is a strategic adversary against the United States, really working in opposition to the U.S. on a number of different fronts. President Trump seemed to want to put all of that behind him and talk about having a brighter future and a better relationship with Russia and trying to work together on things like nuclear proliferation. It's clear that President Trump wanted to show that he could start a new path with Russia and sort of have a reset of his own, but he did it in sort of this fumbling way that led to basically criticism from his own party, because it seemed like he was taking Putin's word over the word of his own intelligence agencies and accepting the word of the Russian president rather than listening to his own administration.
Exactly. There is an open investigation, an open special investigation. 12 Russians have been indicted by name, and President Putin has actually invited Bob Mueller's team to Russia. Could Robert Mueller take him up on that?
Well, I think it's doubtful that Robert Mueller would come to Russia under the various recommendations that President Putin laid out. Basically, President Putin said that Mueller could come to Russia if the Russian investigators are allowed to come to Washington to investigate U.S. operatives. I don't think that's a deal that anyone in the Justice Department would be willing to take. It's sort of a gimmick by President Putin to say, yes, we're willing to be transparent, but we have some things we want to look into as well. President Trump did call it an incredible offer, though, and he seemed to be willing to look into that offer, even though members of his own administration seemed to think of it as more of a gimmick and sort of classic Russian Kremlin-style politicking. It seemed like President Trump is somewhat new to this atmosphere, and he seemed to be intrigued by Putin's offer. And he also called Mueller's probe once again a witch hunt while standing next to Putin. So that's part of another reason why Republicans were so aghast at what President Trump said and why they were so willing to speak out against him on this issue.
And yet the probe continues. Tolu Olorunipa in Washington for Bloomberg News. Tolu, thank you so much, as always. Coming up, Silicon Valley. It has given us the tech we cherish, but a new book is giving us plenty of gossip. On its early days, our conversation with Adam Fisher on his new book, Valley of Genius, next. This is Bloomberg. Uber CEO Dara Khosrowshahi says the ride-hailing company doesn't need to be profitable before a planned IPO in the second half of 2019. Speaking earlier today at the Fortune Brainstorm conference in Aspen, Colorado, Khosrowshahi said he was more focused on generating positive cash flow than making the company profitable. Uber has burned through more than $10.7 billion since being founded in 2009. Meantime, Bloomberg is also reporting that Uber is facing an ongoing gender discrimination probe by the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. This coming as new questions arise about the corporate culture at one of the world's biggest startups. The inquiry reportedly focuses on allegations of pay disparities and other discriminatory conduct toward women. It's one of at least a half dozen federal investigations into the ride-hailing company that have emerged in the last year. Well, it is a hub of American technology, and that's why we're here. It is someplace the Chinese are desperately trying to copy. It has given us Google, Facebook, Twitter, and much more. That is Silicon Valley. But it's got a dark and sometimes sordid history that is once again coming into focus. A new book is shedding light on the early days of Google, making most of its early money off pornography searches, and founder Sergey Brin using it as a personal dating pool. But it's not all about Google. It's not all sordid either. The early days of Facebook being a Lord of the Flies-like office, or Steve Wozniak blowing off the funeral of his co-founder Steve Jobs. All of that is in a new book. My next guest has chronicled it in The Valley of Genius, the uncensored history of Silicon Valley as told by hackers, founders, and freaks who made it boom. Adam Fisher is here with me on set. Thank you so much for joining us.
So happy to be here.
So what's interesting about it is it's an oral history, and so you let them tell the story in their own words, and then you use others to sort of share opposing or different views, if you will. Why did you choose that approach?
Well, you know, the mainstream media, the New York media is always...
Who are you calling mainstream media, by the way?
Not you. I read your book.
Thank you.
And I love it. There is a people think there's a king of Silicon Valley, and if they just find the king of Silicon Valley, they'll understand Silicon Valley. And, you know, it was Steve Jobs, now it's Elon Musk. But really, Silicon Valley has a different structure than that Manhattan hub and spoke structure. It has a network structure. There are many kings of Silicon Valley and queens occasionally, and really it's about, you know, you have to tell the story as a chorus. You have to understand, you know, all the players to really get the full arc. Otherwise, you're missing the point.
So it's interesting you call the book Valley of Genius, and having written a book called Brotopia, I had to chuckle a little bit there. And I wonder if there's any bit of sarcasm there, because, you know, sometimes these big visions and this great genius, you know, doesn't quite work out the way it's promised.
Valley of Genius was a temporary title, and I had to get, so to write this, I had to get the cooperation of 200, you know, kind of billionaire types.
And you do interviews with Larry Page and Sergey Brin.
No, those are archival interviews, okay? And Steve Jobs is also archival. He died before I started. But, you know, I have interviews with literal billionaires who are there helping Page and Brin code, you know, and I can drop names, but I won't. But you needed a cooperation, because everybody had to tell the story in their own words. That's the conceit of the book. And so when you call up and say, hey, I'm writing a book called Valley of Genius, would you like to cooperate?
Much more likely than if you told them it was called Brotopia.
If it was called Brotopia, you're a bro, do you want to talk about it? No, that wouldn't have worked, right? So, and you know, after 4 years of doing this, it kind of stuck. I mean, these guys they all have probably genius IQs,
but they all don't necessarily have the best personal judgment at times. And we have to talk about, you chronicled Google's wild ski parties. You talk about how Larry and Sergey had a harem of women, and Sergey Brin in particular wasn't the best behaved. What did you uncover there?
Well, it was really the chef at Google. He's an interesting guy, Chef Charlie. And he, you would think this is a minor position, but he was the vice president of food or something. So he was in all the meetings.
And threw some pretty awesome parties.
And through these, you know, special dispensation to throw these parties where, you know, drugs were freely distributed. Now, those drugs are now legal in California, so I don't know if it's a huge scandal, but it was wild. I also got the first human resources person at Google, her name is Heather Cairns, to tell me as much as she could, and she she said, yes, people were getting caught in the massage room, having sex with underlings. She didn't name any names, but, you know, if you read between the lines, it's all pretty clear.
Has Google or Larry or Sergey given you any comment on this?
Their comment is no comment.
So let's talk about Facebook, because like Atmosphere in the early days, no surprise, but you've had some fascinating insights from Mark Zuckerberg himself.
Zuckerberg is also, those quotes were taken and credited to the Harvard Crimson, but again, I had his bunch of people who were there in the early days, Ezra Callahan, Katie Geminer, who is the project manager of Facebook, talking about what it was like. And it really was sophomoric. I mean, the company was founded by a sophomore, and it was one huge kind of beer bash. And my favorite anecdote really is them creating a keg that would tell the rest of the office who was drinking and kind of invite them to drink. And the way the story seems to be, it seems like they were drunk kind of half the time when they were coding it up.
So quickly, tell me about Steve Wozniak skipping out on Steve Jobs' funeral.
So this was such a shocker. I sat down with Woz, and we went through the whole history, and then I said, well, tell me about the memorial service. I mean, that was pretty intense, I bet. And he was like, oh, I didn't go. And I said, you weren't invited? And he said, no, I was invited. I was, busy. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he was like, oh, I was on a plane to Europe. And I just thought, oh, now I understand the depth of this rift between not just Jobs and Woz, but kind of the engineer, the creative type who's really making these technologies, and the kind of entrepreneurial kind of conduit to the money that's really, I don't know, I think there's probably too much money in Silicon Valley right now, so I'm not so happy with that side of the valley.
All right. Adam Fisher, there is so much more in the Valley of Genius, in their own words, the uncensored history of Silicon Valley. Adam, thanks for stopping by.
Thank you, Emily.
Coming up, Tesla CEO Elon Musk stirs up the Twitter sphere yet again, and this time both the CEO and Tesla's stock price are going down. This is Bloomberg. A former Apple engineer pleaded not guilty in federal court on Monday after being charged with stealing driverless car secrets for Chinese startup Xiaopeng Motors. Zhang Xiaolong was arrested just before boarding a flight to China for downloading proprietary files after leaving his position at Apple, while Zhang admitted to downloading Apple files to his wife's laptop for continued access. X Motors claims he never shared confidential information from Apple. Well, as the cult around Tesla CEO Elon Musk grows stronger, so do the controversies. Musk took umbrage on Twitter that his mini-sub in Thailand was called a PR stunt, but since deleted his comments. He's also getting criticized for campaign contributions after the self-proclaimed socialist gave $38,900 to a PAC that supports House Republicans. Bloomberg Businessweek's Max Shafkin, who has covered Elon Musk and Tesla, joins us now from New York. Okay, the one thing we left out, Max, is that Elon used the word pedo to describe someone involved in these rescue efforts. We asked this with many of Elon Musk tweets, but this time, has Elon Musk really gone too far?
I think this was a bad one. Elon Musk has been known for picking fights all the time. Often he is not particularly choosy about those fights, and in this case, he picked a fight with somebody who I think had been considered to be a hero. I mean, these divers who saved the boys on that Thai soccer team had risked life and limb, and there's something just totally distasteful about obviously making unfounded accusations, but particularly at somebody at
at that moment. And I think, it's part of a pattern. And with Musk, you have to take the good with the bad. I mean, this is somebody who is extremely hands-on, extremely technical, unconventional in a lot of different ways, and that has led to a lot of amazing marketing. But we have another situation where it's kind of a cell phone, where Tesla's in the middle of this, kind of crisis, trying to get as many cars out the door, and meanwhile you have this distraction.
Let's take a listen to some of Musk's most recent greatest hits, I'll call them.
Let me make a federal case out of it. Your capital requirement. Next. Boring bonehead questions are not cool. Next. Sorry. These questions are so dry. They're killing me. I am not here to convince you to buy our stock. Do not buy it if volatility is scary. There you go.
Okay, that's from the Tesla earnings call, on top of the remarks today that don't bear worth repeating, and even Musk deleted those comments. But, are investors at some point going to question whether Musk has it together?
They're kind of in a bind. The stock fell today, so obviously, or it seems like there was some punishment for this. But part of the problem is that Tesla is probably worth more with Elon Musk running it than without him. And so you have the situation where you have a CEO who is perceived by some to be sort of a little bit out of control, a little bit unfocused. On the other hand, he is also kind of the secret sauce. And to the extent that Tesla, has a future, I think most investors, even a lot of Tesla skeptics, would prefer to have Elon Musk involved. So it's sort of a bit of a, they're in a bind. It's hard to figure out where they go from here.
All right, Max Chafkin, as always, Bloomberg Business Week, thank you so much for breaking it down. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. We are going to keep our coverage of Amazon's glitched Prime Day front and center tomorrow, with over $3 billion in estimated sales at stake. I'm Emily Chang. This is Bloomberg.